Well, welcome. Tonight we're going to do a show that many in Massachusetts did not think would ever happen. We're going to do a show talking about after the election, now that President-elect Trump is coming in. And we've got a couple guests, one that you'll automatically know which side he's on, because he not only has the cat ate the canary look, has the cat ate the canary, its family, its relatives, and the whole neighborhood look. But why don't we start with introductions?
I'm not the guy with the canary. That's this one. Chris Moore, member of the FinCom here in town.
Ed Bertarelli, Republican Town Committee.
So Ed, we got to let you start.
Well, I got to step back a bit. Most of the conservative panelists we've had on here, Bob Burns, who's not here tonight, and Chris and I, we weren't really initial supporters of Trump. But I think as a lot of people found as the campaign progressed, options became more and more limited. And I think what you saw, at least from the polling and everything I've seen, is a huge number of Republicans came home to the party within the last 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of the election. Now, granted, Gary Johnson and Bill Weld still got a number of upscale Republicans in the suburbs of the country, and I'm not sure what Gary Johnson's final total was. I think it was probably 2 or 3 million. A good percentage of those were probably Trump voters. But still, I think things had moved, and Trump's campaign, which seemed to be not well run, and I believe he spent less than half of what she spent on her election.
Well, if I can, no matter what you think, you've got to give him the credit. He's brilliant in how he became president, spending no money.
Yes.
It seems like he spent on the presidential race about what a senatorial campaign cost.
Yeah, and he used basically the any publicity is good publicity, and every time he was getting beat up, and every time a new issue was raised with him, his numbers went up.
Yeah.
And he basically used the media to do his bidding, and I think that that was his main asset, is because they were going after him so hard that he, like I said, it was just constant press for him.
It was frustrating because obviously he knew the media were no friends of his, but it must have been very annoying for them to realize that he was playing them, and he played them masterfully. But as you saw if you sought to see his campaign from the beginning, you saw in the early primaries he knew that Jeb Bush was his main contender. So he did everything in his power through the debates and whatever to marginalize Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush didn't seem to have the fight to be in it, and Trump played on that. And then I think Trump played the fact that no one wanted to be trumped by Donald, and so everyone stayed back and let him do what they wanted, and he was able to maneuver his way through the party primaries and then get to the convention and then go from there. But the hidden thing, which I sort of know being involved in the Republican Party stuff, is that Reince Priebus, the new chief of staff and the party chairman, he did a masterful job on the state and local level mobilizing Republican voters for the Senate. And he realized if you're going to go vote for your Republican Senate candidate, you're probably going to vote for Trump. So in state after state where they thought the Democrat might win.
But now you look at the map.
Yes.
You got 2 racing stripes of blue.
Yes.
And then everything in the middle, red.
Yes. Yep. Except for a few holdouts.
Yeah.
People talk a great deal about the important thing to point out. People talk about Hillary's 3-point-something million popular vote margin. Astonishingly, Hillary Clinton carried California by over 4.5 million votes. So her entire margin was in one state.
Yes.
Because California, as it's marched to the left, the loony left, has changed its law where when you run for Senate, instead of having a Republican and Democratic primary, you have an open primary. So if the 2 people that run for U.S. Senate happen to be Democrats, they face one another. Louisiana does the same thing, but that's a smaller state. So they call it the jungle primary. In other words, you're all in a group, and the top two run against one another. Well, in California, the two candidates running for U.S. Senate were both Democrats. So what was the point of coming out for a lot of people except to vote for Trump and your congressman? So it's amazing to see, people talk about popular vote, but literally her margin and more was just made up in California alone.
But now, wait a minute. If you're a heavily Democratic state,
Yes.
that works to your advantage.
Yes.
Because you're basically saying
that's why the
no other party.
Exactly.
That's why the legislature rammed it through, because it's completely controlled by the Democrats, California. Now, they have veto-proof margins, sort of like Massachusetts does, except we have a Republican governor.
Yeah, which has always been
Yeah.
an interesting question.
And then you saw, I guess this is the real chuckle part is, then you saw they were going to harass the electors, the members of the Electoral College. And the Democrats are going to convince enough through Hollywood stars and death threats. I think one guy in Michigan got 25,000 letters, most of them death threats. A great tribute to the country, I'd say, ironically. And she ended up losing more electors than he did.
Ed, you bring up the Hollywood elite.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I'm old. I get confused. Because you're a good actor. You're making 10, 20 million, whether you like that man or woman or not. If you can make 10, 20, 30 million a year, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So if I want to learn acting, I could see wanting to get advice from Hollywood's actors
Yes.
and actresses. But what gives them the thought that I'm going to value their political opinion?
Good point. Good question.
And it was a big strategy by the Democrats in order to do that. And you saw that Hillary went after all those stars. She had Beyonce, she had Katy Perry, because they were courting the younger vote that did come out for Obama in both his elections. And they thought that these people they don't know the issues, but they know the faces. And these people, they thought, were going to be swayed by someone that they know and recognized and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of times to the uneducated people that they will get swayed.
Well,
unfortunately, on the other side, you had another guy who was on TV for about 5 years on his own show, and he got his own press, and Trump himself had quite a following just from his TV shows.
I think the sensible people in the country, when you saw near the end of the campaign, rallies where you had Hollywood stars basically using profanity and racially tinged slogans and everything else to get people to go vote for Hillary, was so over the top that for a lot of people, their role models are teachers, firemen, and policemen. They're not making $10 million a year. They're saving and changing people's lives. And for the people in Wisconsin, Michigan, the solid people in the center of the country, no racist bones in their body, okay? They were repelled by this. They were also, I think, repelled by the whole fact of the way people just basically played very cute with the Black Lives Matter movement and embraced it and brought them into meetings and never even brought the families of policemen in. And you wonder, a classic misreading, because what it did was it showed who people were playing to, and not a group that, to me, were up, as I said, the policemen, teachers, and firemen, who they're uplifting the country. They're trying to do their service.
But Ed, when you look at some of the stars, the musicians,
Yes.
I was amazed to see some of the people whose lyrics and songs really aren't the most
Yes.
flattering
Family.
towards women and
Yes.
family.
Yes.
And I'll admit, I'm prejudiced.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
2 daughters and
Yeah.
my darling bride. So when I hear somebody talking
Yes. Well,
less than even neutral about women, it bothers me.
And then
Because
it's-
they're talking about my kids.
And
And
that's
then
the same
to see
way.
them on stage, though,
Talking
telling
about
you
how
you should
this
vote for a woman.
candidate is
Yeah.
the right one for women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there scratching my head saying, but wait a minute. For years, you've been saying not so nice things about women.
Yeah, and then the question is, okay, so I'm a Hollywood star. Does that give me leeway to do things that would get a policeman, a teacher, or a fireman fired? In other words, drug use, spousal abuse, the old antics, the panoply of things that unfortunately, many of these Hollywood people think goes with the territory. So I think Hillary, and there were stories that her husband felt the same way. he was concerned that she was very.
Well,
She,
Bill
she was
came out
very-
and said, "You're not spending enough time in Wisconsin." And to me, what that meant is the square states, the red area.
Well,
you're
if
taking
you
it
take,
for granted.
You take this whole area. There was a senator. Oh, I've just forgotten his name. He ran for president. He was a senator from Virginia. He did a book on the Appalachian people, the Scotch-Irish people. You'd say hillbillies, but that's really not the case. It's the huge Scotch-Irish group. If you take that whole group of the country and look at the last election, Trump carried it. It switched, well, it had always been pretty Republican, but it went overwhelming up the rivers in the inner core of the country, Wisconsin, Missouri, Ohio, a huge margin. So I think the public spoke. You can talk about margins, but again, you talk about recounts. Joe Stein made a big effort about recounts.
But that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Ed. You got to
Yeah.
give her credit.
Yeah.
My campaign brought in $32.80. I'm going to call for a recount.
And raised $6 million?
$6.5 million?
Yeah. Well, in the one state, in Wisconsin, Trump gained more votes. And then to show you remember the Democrats are always pretty clear that there's no such thing as election fraud. That's vote suppression or whatever. The recount was stopped in Michigan when they found there were more ballots than voters in Detroit. 700 and something more ballots than voters. So I'm wondering what the value of these ballots were. So it
I
was
thought
like
that was Chicago.
yeah,
vote
well,
early
yeah,
and often.
I guess it's been moving over.
Mayor
yeah.
Daley has a
Yeah.
cousin.
Yeah. So now we're
Here we are.
approaching 16 days to the inaugural, I believe.
I absolutely have a problem listening to some of the people who say he's not my president. When Obama came in, I was not an Obama fan. But the day he became the president of my country, I mean, I kind of think of it, I'm in a rowboat. I may not like you, but I'm not going to drill holes here to sink you because we're in the same boat.
Well, that goes to the next sort of thing we were going to talk about, and that's this allegations of the Russians involved. That the Russians interfered. A friend of mine's father said, "Can you imagine the day the Russian election results were, the American election results were, all the Russian Duma got up and gave Trump an ovation?" I said, what am I supposed to do about that? But you look at Julian Assange has just spoken. He's saying that Podesta's password on his computer was password. He said a 14-year-old could have figured that out. But the question is, which I say to all of our friends who blame the Russians, were all the content of those emails, the embarrassing emails that the Democrats sent out, attacking Bernie Sanders, attacking other candidates, attacking all sorts of people, were they phony? No.
But
They
see,
were.
There's the issue I
Yes.
had. To me, there were two separate
Yep.
issues. One was if the Russians are hacking into
Yes.
our political parties, that you got to deal with.
Yes.
But more importantly, did they make it up? Did
Yeah.
Julian Assad make up those emails?
And that's what they try to blow off immediately. When you say, "Well, is anything you said
Yeah.
not true?" and then they immediately get started. Well, that's not the point.
Yeah.
So, but
it's
the
not
is-
point one, but point two.
Exactly, and the matter, and the point is, they have always on both sides of a political debate. Each side tries to get information on the other.
Of course.
it happens. Of course, they came up. You think that tape
Private
from Access
detectives.
Inside or whatever it is
Yeah.
didn't get from a producer where Trump said those horrible things about women? You didn't think that got leaked out? Of course it did. How did it? Of course, the Democrats courted that.
When I heard that, Chris,
Yep.
Trump and that other fellow should have been slapped because what they
Absolutely.
said was wrong.
There's no question.
But that's a separate issue.
But once again,
But again, it's
information
ironic that the
came
same
out.
people saying this are the ones who do the lyrics that sort of.
Yeah.
So.
But it's just like I said. They never argued that the stuff was true.
Yeah.
So they just argued the way it came out, and that's what
Wasn't
my
true.
problem is.
Yep.
Wasn't.
It was true. You did say it. You just don't like that it came out. And
Yes.
whatever excuses you want to make, maybe it was the Russians, maybe it wasn't. That's neither
Well,
here nor
but-
there. The point is, the information that came out was factual.
How could
It affected
anybody
voters.
say the election was not slanted towards the favorite candidate, Hillary?
Yes. No
You
question.
start
The
out with
media
a
coverage.
third superdelegates.
Yeah.
The media is
But,
again
Ed,
overwhelmingly
forget the media.
Democrat.
No, just number one. I'm going to give you a third of the votes head start.
Yeah.
Well, the other question is, when you look at the emails, you realize beside the third of the votes, they had the whole organization of the Democratic National Committee rooting for Hillary.
Right.
But the other thing is that one thing that they haven't said too much is that the Russians did attempt to hack the Republican National Committee. The irony was, the Democrats, they picked Podesta. Okay. The Republican National Committee, they picked someone who had left the job. This is in the investigation, who would quit. So his email, in other words, he didn't have quite the access. But they said maybe they weren't as vigorous going after the Republicans, but if it's the Russians or whoever it was, the hackers wanted information on everybody.
Yeah.
That's the key thing.
Yeah.
But again, there's no effort. As I said, we managed to bungle our own thing in Detroit without Russian help of having more ballots than voters. Yeah. So any idea that the Russians did anything else, but I think what they did was, and it's funny because Putin made a statement a couple of days ago about Obama was a loser, and they were sore losers. And Putin's analysis of the American political system was pretty right on, from a guy coming from the background he comes from.
When I was in Moscow, either the last time or the time before that, I saw a poster that, to me, a picture's worth 1,000 words. They show Putin bare-chested with a puma, and then they show our president with I think it was a little poodle puppy dog. I didn't even have to read the Russian.
Yeah.
But that told you
and it's a
what
picture of the last 8 years, and to be honest with you, and what we've seen happen. And I don't think we're going to get into this tonight, but I mean, you see what's happened in the Middle East, you see what's happened in North Korea, you see all these issues that's happened over the last 8 years. And I think a lot of that is because of the perception of our president and what he was willing to do.
You see the horror show
in
Syria,
Yeah.
a country that we talked about before, has been settled for 5,000-6,000 years. People live there, different religious, ethnic groups.
What's Aleppo? Oh,
Yeah,
no, that was.
But again, the tragedy is that a country went from a prosperous country to one where refugees are all over the world. Largely, people always said, well, George Bush is to blame for Iraq. Well, Barack Obama has a great deal of blame for Syria because his red line was nothing. Everyone understood it.
See, there's the problem I have. If you're going to make a threat,
Yes.
you lose. To me, we ought not be making threats.
Yeah.
You sit there and say, Chris, if you do this, A, B, and C will follow.
Yeah.
It's not a threat, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
No.
If you do this, A, B, and C follows. The minute you do it, we're not talking anymore.
Yeah.
But the
problem
follows
is when
never
you
happen.
do say, that's the point. When you do say that this is what's going to happen,
follow-up never happens.
and it doesn't happen, if you're sitting on the other side,
Shades of Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Remember
Yes.
with the Iranians?
Oh yes,
No
they
question.
toyed. They
If
toyed
you
with
don't, oh please, oh come on.
Yep.
And you sit there and
They
say,
toyed with him.
they played him.
Yep.
But
And
again-
we've been getting played.
Yeah, but again, you look at
and Reagan's seat wasn't even warm, and those guys were off.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all of a sudden it's like, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, during the campaign, Trump said things that, candidly, I wasn't in favor of or proud of, for the shock.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you see him now settling more into, hey, this is real?
I think anybody, he's definitely toned it down. He still is throwing things out there. Someone's got to steal his phone because his Twitter account
Oh, the
is-
Twitter?
Holy
But
moly.
don't you think that's Trump's slap
Well, the irony
against
It is,
the
and
New
the
York
media- it
Times
is,
and the
because he-
But the
media?
irony
would
is
rather
he's
go
not going
directly
to get his statements reported fairly by the New York Times or CNN.
correct.
He isn't.
So he wants to
didn't
go
all
directly to
through
the
the
voters.
election. And today, a lady on Fox News pointed out, here's Trump, 70 years old, twittering, and his accounts going on. And here you have Chuck Schumer in the Senate. We're going to roll up our sleeves, and he's surrounded by Nancy Pelosi. I mean, again, a crew of people who are has-beens.
But Ed, I guess some of the things Trump said, if he had said them differently, I could support. When he said
Yeah.
we should not allow anybody into the country, if he had said not allow anybody in the country that we can't vet, I could support that.
Yeah, but he was,
saying I'm not going to let any
but
Muslims
he
in
raised
bothers me.
Yeah, but fine. It bothered you, but maybe it didn't bother a lot of people in the sense that he raised the issue to a level of notoriety.
So now where I'm getting to is now
Notoriety.
that he's got the gun and the bullets, right?
Maybe.
I mean, for a while, all the candidates were like Barney Fife.
Yeah.
If you remember Andy of Mayberry, gave him a gun, never gave him a bullet. Now the guy's got gun and bullets, and I'm watching. First thing I'm going to do is take out Obamacare. And all of a sudden I'm hearing him say, well, wait a minute, not all of it. There's some good points we should keep.
Yeah. And I do think you're going to see some backtracking and all that stuff. I think a lot of this stuff was political rhetoric to get the issues.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, I think he is still going to be very aggressive on doing certain things, but I definitely think that the levels that he was talking about during his campaign, you just can't. And I do think that the fact that when you sit in that room and you have what they call the football sitting next to you, and you have the lives of 6 billion people, I think you come to a realization, and I don't care how wacky you are.
That's what's
I
made
think
me
you have
feel
a moment
better,
of truth.
is I sit there and
you
I say,
realize
okay,
that.
you know, the whole thing about I'm going to build a wall. I mean, everybody envisioned 9 gazillion bricks building a wall.
The wall is the will.
But see, now all of a sudden, he's not talking about buying 9 gazillion bricks. He's talking about an idea, a concept, and now you got to figure out, is it really a brick wall?
I give you a quick, and you can go on the internet and check this out. There's a wall separating Guatemala from Mexico. A wall. Because Guatemalans try to come into Mexico on their way wherever. So I guess a wall is good in some places and it isn't good in others. So you have to, I think, there's a lot for him to do. Rolling back the regulation nightmare that Obama tried to put in, in the last few minutes.
That to me, I mean, I find
You see the American industry's already saying we're going to have a more business-friendly environment than the EPA and whatever.
We're feeling it because all of a sudden, I've got a series of regulations. You're feeling it.
Yeah.
You know, the minute you get up over 10, 20, 30 people, you got new regulations you got to monitor. You got all these additional steps. Well, those don't come free.
Of course not.
So that kind of thinking that, government knows best and they're going to monitor everything I do, I can absolutely support him in his efforts to say, the pendulum swung too far.
His cabinet shows this, and his Secretary of State nominee, Rex Tillerson, the chairman of ExxonMobil, he's gotten attacks because he's friendly with Putin, but I think the point is, Trump has shown this as well. Diplomacy is largely economic. I mean, John Kerry's shown the futility of being a political Secretary of State. I mean, his last statements attacking Israel, doing this and he's a windbag, basically. I hate to say it because he's service to his country and he was a pretty good senator here. But the point is, diplomacy and economics are hand in glove.
But Ed, if you were Kerry,
Yeah.
can you think of somebody being put in a situation more likely to fail? I've got a president behind me who says there's a red line. Well, not really. Let me erase it. Who won't stand up
Even
to
Kerry,
anybody.
Kerry wanted to mention this, and he was brushed off by the Obama.
But that's my
No, there's no
point.
question. He did.
Kerry was not a strong
but it's
Well,
not funny
you put a
that-
weak person and you weaken them even more.
Right.
So,
Isn't it strange that that Obama was savvy enough to give that thankless job to his first competitor, Hillary, and then to John Kerry? So basically, you were sort of the coat holder for Obama's failed foreign policy. Because what policy did he represent? I mean, she was hung out to dry on Benghazi. I mean, yes, she probably totally miscalculated, and through her, in whatever you would call it, people died, but the policy was set in motion by him. So we look at this, look at the gift of
But Ed,
Obama.
Again, take a step back. If she had gotten up the next day and said, I'm sorry,
Yes.
it happened on my watch. I didn't make the right decision,
Yes.
but I made the decision I thought was right at the time. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I don't think anybody would fault her. They wouldn't like it, but when she got up and said, what difference does it make? I mean, my nerves. I mean, to
They're
those,
dead. They're dead.
well, that's why, and that was just another display
Indication.
of her being her.
That's why I
And
referred to her as Hillary Milhouse
Well,
Clinton.
I'll tell you right
'Cause
now.
she fell the same way as she was
I think
Nixonian.
Chris captured it, her being her. Question is, what candidate outside of Donald Trump would have had the cojones to call her crooked Hillary?
Yep.
The Republicans would have been polite, just like Bernie tried to be polite to her when he said the emails didn't matter. She waited a couple of days, then she went after him.
I'm not in the same place.
No?
If I look at some of the Republican candidates, Jeb Bush, if he was in it at the end,
Yeah, but would he have said what he needed to say
No.
to close the election? She had to be attacked.
I don't know.
And I think
I think she had to be attacked.
And I'm
The-
telling
the
you-
email server that she did, the way she did it and the arrogance involved had to be constantly exposed.
Yeah.
Remember when Trump basically said, by the way, please, Russians, anyone, release your emails. We don't have them.
I
know,
hear you, Ed, but at the end,
Yeah.
I really have more faith in the American public that everything that came out with her, to me, was Nixonian. She believed, and
No
Bill too,
question.
they're above the law. So if you had a gentleman, a Rand Paul, if you had a
telling
Bush,
you, those-
if
There's
you
no
had
politi-
Carly,
Yep.
No
I don't know that
political
they had
instincts.
to be
No.
ruthless.
I see. I think that there was a perfect storm of candidates. I'm telling you, and
Yeah,
I truly
well,
believe
it
this.
worked out.
I think that if Trump was against any other decent Democrat, I don't know that Trump would have won.
Yeah,
I
but-
don't think so.
Also, on the other hand, if Hillary was against anyone but Trump,
But-
I don't think
but the key-
anyone
Right.
would have beat Hillary.
The key
it was just a
miscalculation
perfect
was this.
storm of the two of them coming together.
The Democrats followed what the Republicans did for 6, 8, or 12 years. Our retreads always got the nomination. In other words, Mitt Romney lost,
Romney
he
again,
gets it. McCain, whatever. Well, Hillary's owed it. We'll stack the convention. She had the McNally from Baltimore, who was not in Maryland, who was not even serious, and Bernie. She scared everyone off who could have run. So it was hers, and she laid a big egg.
And on the Republican side, they couldn't find enough room to put all the people
Well,
who were
but
running.
still, it worked out, though.
No, it certainly did, and I think that was another reason that Trump ended up making it to the end. And when you
Yeah.
start with 16 people,
Divided
and
field.
you're going to have, that was another
Now,
thing.
he is our president, or will be.
Yep.
End of story. We have to hope that he's successful. I don't care about these doom mongers who want to drill holes in the rowboat and
Yeah, but
don't
again,
realize that.
why
by
even
s-
acknowledge them? That's the point.
So now you
Yeah.
turn around
Yeah.
and you say,
Yeah.
I got a kick out of why is he getting involved with United or with Ford bringing over a few jobs?
Because he understands how to do this.
But Ed, to me, I'm sitting there saying, wait a minute. Oh, it's statistically insignificant. I said, not if you're the 700
Yeah.
people.
Well, doesn't that
exactly
show
right.
you? Doesn't that show you how he is in more contact with the working people, not the union bosses, but the elites in Washington and L.A.? Well, what's 800 jobs? I mean, those are just who would want those jobs anyway? This is what they've been saying for 10 or 12 years,
again,
Al.
do you
Don't
remember?
you think so? That's the point.
Absolutely.
And to me, this
do
is
you
just the
remember
first domino to
unemployment
fall.
is a statistic until you are
Well,
included?
There's no question.
The
Right,
elite-
when
the
you get
elite-
laid off.
the elitism of the media industrial complex, or the high tech media, the high tech industries where they're up here, and these are working jobs. Wow. Well, most of those people's grandparents paid for what they have today by having jobs like that, and that's where the country's forgotten that, and it's very
Well,
bothersome.
I don't know that that's absolutely accurate because spending my life lately in biotech,
Yeah.
it's hard to find top people. But I'll tell you what, the thing that's holding Massachusetts back are the college graduates that aren't plentiful enough. We need operators. We need manufacturing people. And you start really valuing them. And these are good jobs. These are $50,000, $60,000, $70,000.
But again, when there's no respect for those jobs in a lot of factions of the country, when you look at it, there's a subtle message sent, and this is what I think Trump went right under the radar screen with a whole lot of these groups of people going. Now you're in Wisconsin. I would argue, spending some time in Minnesota and spending some time in Wisconsin, no finer state with the demographics, the mix of people, the progressive, Bob LaFollette, the Progressive Party presidential candidate, was from Wisconsin, okay? Speaker Ryan's from Wisconsin. Good people, educated people, you know, not extremes of one or the other. And you look at all the counties and how they changed from sort of ancestral Democrat to Trump. Boom. It's interesting to see that a great swath of people, and even in Minnesota, not just rural, but, you know.
I grew up in an immigrant house.
Yep.
My father, I've always said, in my opinion, and I'm jaundiced, was the most educated, uneducated person I knew. He only had 4 years of school, because that's what you got in Portugal before you had to go into the fields to make enough money to feed your
Yes.
family. But he taught me life lessons.
Yep.
You know, that people should be judged on their merits and nothing else.
Well, there's little enough of that today. That's the problem.
And when you look and you say, he always joked, he said, you want to be a janitor? Go be a janitor. Be the best one there is. You want to be sanitation guy? You want to be president? Just whatever you're doing, show pride and be the best there is. And you sit there and say, okay, if you don't value your custodians. In a biotech world, contamination can eat you alive. So if these people aren't doing that job and doing it well, then bacteria grows and your cultures go down. And the you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or the brand new trainee. Everybody deserves respect for their position.
But we lost track of that. And part of it's through what we saw this reaction to, and I'm just not laying it all in this election, this elitist point of view that coming out and telling
obviously
people.
Trump, if this had been 8 years ago,
Well,
I don't know that you'd have the sentiment.
yeah, but you
Of
had
the
8 years of
anti-establishment.
Obama.
Well,
You
I
had
think,
8
and
years of
that's what,
Obama.
and that was what was fueling the fire
You're
in a
s-
lot
you're
of
s-
people. And I'm telling you, having 8 years coming off that, I think is what caused this fusion of anger about government.
No,
People
yeah.
were outright. It was just.
Yeah.
Even there was supporters for him in the beginning. He was supposed to do this. He promised. And 8 years later, you're still waiting. And let me tell you,
Let me ask you something.
It's not there.
We just got
And you get angry.
stuck with a bill. Here we are in Massachusetts. You voted for this bus. I voted for this bus service because we were getting 75 grand from, or whatever it was, 50 grand,
Yeah, yeah,
50
Yep.
from the state.
Yep.
Okay. Halfway in, Charlie Baker, our governor,
9C cuts, yeah.
sorry, we don't have the money.
Yep.
But I don't see any people up in arms, at least not a lot, saying he's doing the wrong thing, running a.
No, but 9C cuts they're done at a certain time of year, and they're based on priorities. And the governor's priorities may be different than some other people's, but a lot of these, 75,000, 100,000, whatever, was sweetness to certain reps or whatever. And what easy come, easy go. The one thing I want to just...
But I guess, Ed, before you go on,
yeah.
I'm not seeing a tidal wave. It's not like the old guy at OMB who said $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking real money. I'm not seeing people screaming, even
Well-
here in Milford, saying, Governor Baker, you're doing the wrong
Well, but
thing,
again,
balancing the budget.
But the point is he's an accomplished manager, and it's clear to everyone that he's an accomplished manager. He has a great lieutenant governor who's from the area, and people start to look at things like his reforms at the T, which he's just done. Yeah, they're modest, but they're far-reaching, and they're going to last forever. I could tell you from working at Department of Transportation for a number of years, the T was untouchable because of it was independent and remote and so politically wired.
Except when it needed money.
Well, it was so politically wired that it
Couldn't be touched.
no matter who the governor was, it didn't matter. You just fiddled around the edge because the people involved, the boards and whatever. But there have been substantial reforms that if even the union people reflect on it, will show that they're, I think, going to make the system better. So when you see the things that are going on, now, obviously, you know, we could say he did miscalculate, although he did it from a principled way on the charter school question.
Okay.
All right, but
So
I think even the people there, and of course the MTA and the teachers union and everyone rallied and whatever. But I think even the people who are not fanatics will say that
But wait a
Charlie
second.
took a principled stand.
We don't ever expect. Chris and I have been working together for a while on the
Yes.
FinCom. There are times when we don't agree.
Yep.
Okay, I don't expect to agree with him 100% of the time. Okay? With Charlie Baker, okay, so he felt that way about charter schools.
Yes.
A lot of people didn't. Okay.
That's right.
But again, I don't see
That's
this.
a sign of a good leader, though.
That's
But
Is-
you also
is really-
see-
this is
you
just
also
showing what
see-
people's
yes.
confidence
And
in
you also
Baker.
see that people see, even though I may disagree with someone's intentions, we know they were going to the right way.
That's
You
what I
know,
mean. That people
yeah.
they think he's a good leader.
Everybody
They have
believes
confidence in him.
he was following his heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
I may only agree with you 8 out of 10 times, but okay, those 2 times I'm going to, okay, I'll deal with it because these other 8 I agree with, and
Yeah.
even those 2, I don't see you playing political games or mortgaging the future of my state. I see you doing the right thing.
I think, and again, I come from a point of view of obviously a supporter of his, but we're lucky to have him.
Absolutely.
And
Karen.
Lieutenant
Yes,
General
yes.
Polito,
I mean,
yeah.
Karen came here when she was running
Yes.
for
Yep.
treasurer.
Yeah.
And it was just, I like this person.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, and I've always laughed in saying in Milford, people vote for people they like and trust.
Yes. Yep.
You know, I mean, God forbid if you ever looked and said, how would you ever have a Republican governor
Well,
in Massachusetts
Yeah,
if
but
you
again-
didn't trust them and like them?
yep.
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 And he certainly personifies that.
And-
I think the
and-
town,
yeah.
the state's in great
Yeah.
hands.
But again,
with
I didn't
him.
see anybody screaming that we
No,
lost
but-
50 grand, let's go lynch them.
Well, no one even, I mean,
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
but no, Ed, that's real money to our little town.
yeah, I understand that, but in the scope of things, people have to prioritize. And if we say all or nothing,
But I don't, you know, I don't think a lot of people really take the time or have the time to understand it.
who
But they
even,
sit
I
there.
didn't even, I had no idea till you said, I'd tell you that the money was even gone.
But see,
Yeah.
a lot of people are looking, saying, "Okay, he made cuts. Seems like he's doing the right thing, so it must
Fine.
be a good reason."
Yep.
Well, unless
I
the
hope-
media is going to follow up and list them, and that's another thing I think we should really speak about. I mean, the state of our media, locally and statewide, is declined dramatically. I mean, we go back and we say it in Milford, there are enough people out there, old-timers and not so old-timers, who remember a really good Milford Daily News. A solid local paper that had pages and pages of coverage, had advertisements, had a huge outreach.
That was a
in the
local paper.
I
When
just,
we
wait,
grew
wait,
up, it
wait,
was
but
a
just let
local
me say, whatever, but a good local paper. Our progress, quote unquote, is to what we have now, which sort of sells for $1 unless you go to the dollar store, and you can buy it for 25 cents, by the way, if anyone out there, fellow cheapies out there who want to know that. A friend of mine told me that. But
gonna be a
here
line
we
there
are,
tomorrow
here
now,
we
Murray
are,
Riley.
a story, a page that has literally filled with news, with sports stories and 3 or 4 news stories. And so we've gone from a solid local paper where you could look for information locally. Now, we may be facing that with our radio station as well, but I'm not sure.
How many newspapers do you have delivered to your house?
Well, none, except the Sunday one.
I was going to say, I'm one of the few.
Yeah.
Because I get the Milford Daily News, I get the Boston Globe,
25 cents, I'll deliver
and the
it
New
for
York
you.
Times,
Yep.
all delivered
I'll
to my
deliver-
house
oh,
every
New
day.
York
When we were a
Times, do
kid,
you have a
you-
parakeet?
Yeah.
A canary?
As much as I don't like their slant, they are about the only investigative news
come on.
print. Ed, who else am I going to go?
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal. Come on.
I mean, I look at the when
That's
I first
better paper than
is.
the New York
when
Times.
I moved back to Milford
What did you
from
get?
Washington.
Did you get Pravda then, or what did you
No,
get?
Pravda we used to get in Moscow. We used to get Pravda in Moscow. But in Paris, we got the International Trib,
Yeah.
which was the Wall Street,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Washington Post and New York Times combined. Moved to Washington, I got the Post.
Yeah, but-
I moved to Boston, I looked for foreign policy, and they're talking about disputes with New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I'm not a
But
fan of
but
the way they slant
But,
their
but,
news.
but let's just go back to Milford, because so here's a story where we were originally talking about why no one knows what's going on. That's where we started
Well,
this
at the
conversation.
end of the
with.
day, you take the Milford Daily News, and I get it,
Well,
all
whatever.
7 days. I look at the local section, Natick,
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute.
But my question was why no one knows about this bus cut is because no one cares enough to cover it. So
The only one that'll cover it is Kevin and Al Holman
Yeah.
at the Crier.
No.
But that's every 2 weeks.
That's the problem.
yeah.
You know, that's 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
Something happened. They do the best they can, but it's every 2 weeks.
Yes. But
And look at the radio. You brought it up. Our Howard Stern is gone. Ed Thompson, everybody complained that he had a bias.
well,
But
I think
he
he
was
would
not a
even- I think
newsman.
He admits he has a
He was a
bias.
personality.
he'd have to
you,
be.
you didn't
A
tune
shock
in to
jock.
the 9 minutes
Yeah.
to hear about what's going on in Syria. You wanted to find out if Chris Morin kicked his cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, or something happened. Well, that's gone.
If certain candidates rose from the dead, we won't mention any names.
But you know, at the end of the
exactly.
day, the local part is going on. I mean, the closest I get now is the patch on my phone every day.
God, please, yeah. That used to be a pretty good one, and now that since that's sold again, it's generic.
But you
It
know,
is difficult, and it makes it hard for anyone in our area to get news about what's going on, whether locally, statewide.
So now-
you go to the internet now.
we're listening to two things that I'm kind of getting a kick out of. One, Obama and his administration saying that Trump should not use executive orders to undo all the executive orders that Obama put in.
Well,
Isn't that the pot calling the kettle colors?
the undercurrent about this is if you could get a Democrat on who would tell the truth. And I mean,
be nice.
I'm talking in strategy, not referring to anyone. If it would tell the truth, and I don't mean a local Democrat, I mean
Okay.
a congressional or whatever. Obama had very little to do with his own party when he was in the White House.
Obama had little to do with Congress.
But let me finish my thought, okay? No, we're talking about his own members, the people who took the bullet for him on Obamacare, okay? His executive orders were not just because the Republicans ran things, because for a while they didn't, okay? It was his style that he had this bunker in the White House. You talked about the
Closed door.
Smithsonian bunker, and even the congressional leaders like a Harry Reid, who, God, probably the most ornery guy going, took the bullet for him, and Pelosi did. But if they were to tell you the truth, they didn't know what was going on in there.
Right.
So the result of that was he's been probably the most worst party builder for the party. Since he's been in, the number of offices they've held has gone down by the
And
hundreds.
he was the one that came in and said he's going to have the most transparent administration. And as soon as he got in, they painted the glass black.
And that's what I meant
Yeah,
about
I mean, they
that's what
blacked
I
out
meant-
everything
That's what
around
I meant
him.
about if you
Yep,
did a
exactly.
report card of the Democratic Party from the day he got in to the day he left, and you asked a
somebody
Democrat,
took spray paint.
and they would,
And
they
just
would,
spray painted
and they
all the
would-
glass.
They would give you an honest appraisal of the party.
But
they
now-
would show what happened.
How far do you think Trump will go? I mean, on
Well, Trump is
industrial regulations, I can see
Trump
him.
doesn't owe the thing of Trump. I hate to. Trump is going to have one problem in that a lot of conservative Republicans aren't for anything.
Yeah.
That's the same ones who tried to jinx Paul Ryan, who did whatever. In other words, don't spend money on infrastructure, don't spend money on this, don't spend money on that. Trump is going to go right in their faces, just like he did about the ethics committee. He's going to say, hey, guess what? We need
Exactly.
this.
And that was a great
That
example.
again, when I think of the Trump that everybody calls crazy women,
Crazy like a fox.
Yeah.
he stood up and said, this is silly.
Yeah.
If nothing else, one, you should want an independent ethics committee.
Yeah.
And two, even if you don't, the last thing in the world you want to do is have the appearance that you're gelding
What are you
the-
hiding?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
If I'm not hiding anything,
Yeah.
you know, it's like I'd be coming up to you saying, I want you to take a drug test.
Yeah.
And you'd sit there and say, for what? For heroin, all these weird Molly, Smalley.
Yeah.
And you sit there and say, really? Good. If I pass, you put $1,000 into my local charity.
Yeah.
2 seconds, I'd sign up for that.
Yeah.
Why? I haven't done heroin. I haven't done any of these drugs. I have nothing to hide.
Yep.
Come on. So why would you? And I give Trump credit for standing up.
And you're going to
was
see
perfect.
more of that from him. He's not
think it
not
was
going to take
perfect.
that.
Perfect.
He will stand up and,
Yeah.
and take stands
But
on
isn't
things.
it? But again, he's a businessman, just like Rex Tillerson. They are not politicians.
If
and
something
that's what
doesn't make
people
sense,
like.
he's just going to say
That's
it.
what they like. They're not, George Bush would have been calling his father, or no disrespect to the Bushes, or Clinton would have been calling
George
somebody
Bush
else.
would have tried to soothe it
yes,
through.
yes,
Yep.
yes.
I mean, let's call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both Bushes would have tried to work it through
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Republican Party
Yep.
and quietly bring it back.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he got up and said, "This is stupid."
Yep.
I mean, in essence,
Yep.
whatever
Call a
words he
spade
were,
a spade.
this is stupid.
Yep.
It's bad policy. Fix it. Now, what happens with health care?
Well, we'll see. The key thing is obviously, if you take a state like Minnesota, which I don't know what they call their it's like, Romney Care, but then they have whatever. And Governor Dayton of the Dayton Department Stores is the governor there. That led to a whole takeover of Republicans of state government because MinCare, whatever they call it, has collapsed. The premiums have gone through the roof. It's pretty clear, the reforms, obviously, if the Democrats had asked the Republicans what they would have wanted in Obamacare at the beginning, instead of pushing what they do with no votes, you would have seen the pre-existing conditions, you would have seen the rising age for dependents, you would have seen catastrophic, you would have seen the sensible stuff.
Today we have it.
Yep.
And Obamacare.
Yes, but we also have a whole lot of other
But when
crap with it.
Obamacare on its own is imploding.
Yes.
And I look at it
So
for
we have
one,
to save.
one,
Yeah.
one
so you're
main
saying
reason.
it's imploding as well.
Of course it is.
Yeah, okay.
Because Obama looked at my daughter and all the millennials and said, you can keep what you have.
Yeah.
What he should have been saying is, I'm sorry, youngsters, I'm going to overcharge you.
Yeah.
Because the old people can't pay enough
Yeah.
to cover what they need.
And there's a lot of them.
And
Well.
I need you to pay up
wait a
front because you're going to become old someday. And I look at it today, if you left Obamacare alone, you're either going to dramatically increase how much tax money goes in,
Yep.
okay, or cut services.
The key issue that was I think the Trojan horse here was Obamacare was designed to vastly increase the number of Americans on Medicaid, which is welfare, medical welfare. Not just the elderly or the nursing home bound. So in every state, there are hundreds of thousands of people who, for whatever rules, whether they should be on it or not, are on Medicaid, which means on our dime. Now, whether some of those people can be weaned off it and the rules are changed, it has to, because you can't have, I believe it's millions of people who've been added to the Medicaid rolls. Not Medicare, Medicaid rolls. And I don't think that's sustainable. That's the
Well,
point.
but see,
But I'm
somebody-
telling you right now, it's going to be a hard bell to unring, though. I mean, you can.
Well,
you can.
but there's parts
try
that
your
you
best.
don't want to unring.
No, there's no
No,
question.
but-
There are parts, and he's even said
But,
that.
but you say the
He said
parts
that.
are imploding, where you're supposed to just leave it as it is.
No,
so-
and I didn't say you shouldn't, but I just said it's going to be very
Republicans tried
difficult.
50, almost 50 times to kill it and
Yeah.
never could.
Yeah.
And you sit there and say, really? If they had just sat back. But see, the key becomes when you tell somebody your rates are going up 40%. But by the way, we're going to run a Medicaid run on you, and the most you can pay is $150 a month.
Yeah. You don't care about the other percent.
Well, the fact that
The public's paying it.
that's my
Yeah.
point. It's imploding because you're
Switch
going to
and
have to
bait.
pump
Bait and
so much
switch,
money
whatever you
in.
wanna call it, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the fact that you didn't tell my daughter, you don't have a choice. You're 25 years old. You're going to overpay by 30 or 40% for the next
Well-
20 years so that when you become old,
Well, the
we're gonna take
question,
care of it, yeah.
the question never has been, nor should it be, I should pay by using premiums. Because, years ago we would have had, a classic thing is, why are men's and women's health insurance rates the same for many years, since women were healthier than men? Well, that's the way it is. Why, in most states, do they have single and family plan, not couple plan? Because it brings more of the unmarried people with no children into the thing of paying for the people with kids. So the smokers, why didn't smokers pay higher health? They pay higher health, life insurance rates, but smokers pay the same rates as whatever, because it was an understanding that we were all in this together. And that was a thing in health care that we did.
I think the fundamental principle that everybody deserves health care can't be debated. Because guess what? if you don't treat somebody when they have a cold, you will treat them for free when they have
Show up in the emergency
pneumonia
room.
and show up and look at Jeff Hopkins.
Deserves is a word that's a value-laden word. Let's put it that way.
Are you going to turn away the kid?
I didn't say I just said you said value-laden word.
Yeah.
You just did just
but
what
I mean,
I
at
said.
the end of the day,
I'm not arguing.
one way or another.
There must be a better way to use a term that's involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
One way or another, you have to take care of the people who are your citizens. How you do it, I think, is the debate we're under. Not will you do it.
And it's not an easy question to answer. I mean, and
I wish I had the
First of all, it's
answer.
an industry anyway, just like the education industry. It's one of these things that's hard to unpack and take the levels of the shell around it and get to the truth.
When they quote 40% of every dollar spent on medical goes to admin, you sit there and say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's not a good way to run that airline.
Well, you have on your libertarian show, you have Dr. Segalia on, and he's on some Facebook post points out 18 or 20 page reports on minor procedures that people write, and you're going, good grief, you know. So you see and then the paperwork, the billing, whatever. And
But
who knows?
I don't know the answer. I know when we were
Yeah.
in France, socialized medicine was the best thing that anybody could have given us. Why? Because we were on American Blue Cross.
Yeah.
So when we got sick, we got run to the front of the line.
Yeah, of
we got the best health care in the world.
Again, you're paying taxes, which are
okay, the
incrementally
people
higher
who
than
were
here.
getting socialized medicine thought it stunk because they had to wait in
Why
line.
were they paying in taxes every year?
Yeah.
Well, but Ed, even then, they weren't getting the same level.
No.
It bothered all our friends that here I am a foreigner, my wife's a foreigner. We go in, we go to the head of the line. So socialized medicine, the way we saw it, wasn't the panacea that it looks like.
Well, it isn't.
Yeah.
Never has been. It never
So
hasn't
now,
been in England, hasn't
the
been in
fundamental
Canada.
question that the Republicans got to deal with is for 7 years you've been trying to overturn this thing. What alternative?
That isn't really the case because most of those efforts to overturn it were largely theatrical.
Well, let's say you tried to modify it.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Well,
What do you
we're
have?
not experts. Let the people who are experts. First of all, it took Ezekiel Emanuel and one other person to write this disaster. So, I mean, Rahm Emanuel's brother, okay? That's who wrote this stuff. And it really turned out to be imploding. Well, our duty is to reform it. If you're saying it's imploding and you're being accurate, then we have a fundamental issue to reform it
But again,
and replace it.
More and more companies are pulling out of these markets.
Yep.
The cost is going up 20, 30% a
Yep.
year.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's not a healthy sign for a business. If I'm evaluating it and I'm saying, okay, your costs are going up 20, 30% a year, you're losing more. How many states have one choice?
Yeah, a lot of southern states do, yeah.
To me, that's not a healthy
No.
business. So to me, that's implosion.
Yeah.
Another
then-
question.
Oh.
Obama's been looked at as very weak because he makes threats.
Yeah.
What do you think happens now when our new president steps in?
Well, I mean, you're going to see a night and day contrast. His comments about, I turn on CNN just to hear the latest snit, is his comments about North Korea. Any sane person knows that man or his regime have to be removed from power. Here's a country where literally people are eating grass and dirt, and I wish I were being funny.
No.
And being murdered and brainwashed and whatever. And here's a man who, China's here and whatever. Here's where I think Trump's got a great thing. I think that's one of the things where Trump sits down with someone and say, okay, get rid of our problem, we'll help you out somewhere else.
Yep.
I think the same thing's going to happen with ISIS,
Yep.
with Putin. Trump is a sort of deal maker
He will do
type
horse
guy.
trade.
Horse trade.
Yep.
But, North Korea, to me, if you look at physiology, if you get an infection, the body mounts an immunological
Yeah.
response to kill the bacteria, whatever. If I stick a splinter, the body can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
So it does what's called a foreign body reaction. It encircles it, isolates
Well,
it, and lets it go on.
The point
until-
is,
Well, we've
the point
tried
is
that.
all these regimes have, the UN is the perfect example of useless waste of money, of diplomats coming from countries where most of those people have a hard time in their countries eating, okay? And they're driving around New York in lavish headquarters, plain diplomats. Well, the same way we had Obama, we had Clinton, we had the Bushes, all talking about handling North Korea. It's still there. And we've got one nuttier one than the next in there. Who's going to be next? I mean, can you imagine what his children are going to look like?
Are you really taking on North Korea, or are you taking on China?
You know, you're not. You tell China
yeah.
that this is always going to
Yeah.
be your country.
Yep.
You get rid of Ding Dong.
But you bring somebody else in.
Well, no, but he's a puppet then. He'd be not
yeah.
not an insane
That's fine.
maniac.
Is it our role?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is
Especially
it
with
really?
nuclear
When
weapons.
he starts building,
See, I got a
building
problem.
missiles,
Well, you don't have a problem.
'Cause
You're
if
going
I-
to have a problem if one
If
lands
it
at
was
your
me,
house.
I would call and say, look, you live in a peninsula.
No, you're going to.
you
How
know
are you
what
going to call
surrounds
him? Come on.
What surrounds you is water.
Oy.
What lives in water is nuclear-tipped submarine
Yeah, but wait
missiles.
a minute. Wait a minute, Al. Al, this is the whole point. How do you can't reason with someone of that.
No.
That's
No.
why you have a third
But
party.
again, no more threats. Your nuclear program, I can't
One
stop
day
you.
he wakes up. One day he wakes up, and all his best friends have now turned on him. He's shuffled off to some camp, and the Chinese take the place over. You hate to be that frivolous about it, but
Yeah.
these people have been in abject misery for 40 years
But
while
if the
we've done
Chinese
nothing.
wanted to do that,
Who?
why wouldn't they?
Because I think they're waiting for a real signal.
Yep.
So that's the point.
I mean, if anybody should be worried about short-range nuclear weapons,
They should be
China.
It's China and South Korea.
They should be.
absolutely.
In Japan.
And Japan.
Yeah.
And,
now
and
they're
they
getting
all
longer.
are. And you're starting to see China take a harder stand.
I know, but
I
again, but
never
you-
worried
Yeah.
about
The Chinese
the
have a-
Soviet Union launching on us
No.
because they had too much to lose.
No.
Mutually assured destruction.
MAD worked.
Absolutely.
They had a life, and if they launched on us, we'd launch on them.
That
We're
was-
both gone.
And that was always. That
I
was
worry about countries like North Korea who are eating grass.
Yep.
They don't have a lot to lose.
No, but the
How
point
much
is, the point
worse
is,
can life get?
the point is, the people who are eating the grass have nothing.
Right.
The people is that these savages have done this to them. And here we are. We like to say in the world that we've gone through all these lessons of the Nazis, Mao, Stalin, and we still allow this to
Khmer
happen.
Rouge, and here we go
Yeah,
again.
we allow this to happen. But I
Hey.
think it's going to be an interesting. I see we're winding down. I think it's going to be an interesting, challenging year. And I think with Trump, all bets are off.
Well,
you're gonna
First
be,
90 days are going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to see 90 days from now if the canary-eating Ed's smile
No.
is still
Wait
there.
a minute now. I think you were probably more Trump than I was along the way. So let's go here.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. As always, he is our president. We have to wish him all the success because his success is our success.
Yes.
Just like President Obama, when he became our president, we wished him nothing but success. So, to our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. And stay tuned. We'll see what the canary looks like in 90 days.
Yeah. Yep.
Far too long since I've